Good evening. I hope your week, the first week of Elul, is coming along, and that the atmosphere being set is one conducive to a person sliding into the aroma and the atmosphere of tshuva for Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. I would like to acknowledge Torah Anytime, who magnificently is spreading Devar Hashem and making a Kiddush Hashem throughout the world. And may they continue their noble efforts. This week's Seder is Parshas Teitzei. Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky, Zecher Tzadik Levrocha, my Rosh Yeshiva in Torah V'das, asked a question: why is it that in Parshas Teitzei there are so many different mitzvahs, Kedushin, Gittin, Chalitza, Yevam, Yibum, and so many that really belong in Parshas, in Sefer Vayikra, which deal with relationships, everything usher, everything mutter, and that's really where it belongs. All these topics, why is it here in Parshas Teitzei? So asked the Rosh Yeshiva. He answered and said that the fact that there are so many, he went into an arichas that the first three sedras is tochocha, to let them know what was on his mind, Devarim, Voeschanan, and Akev. And then we come to Re'eh and Shoiftim, which are chock full of mitzvahs for the klal. Melech, tzedakah, these are universal type mitzvahs which are discussed. And then we come to Parshas Teitzei, which is a continuation of the idea of klal. And since Aroyos are two people, and that's what's listed in Vayikra, but the Torah chose to have these communal mitzvahs in Devarim, and that's why it said in Teitzei, and the Rosh Yeshiva explained himself that when we have two people getting married, it is something which is part of the shalsheles, the chain of Klal Yisrael. And that's why he said that if a chassan goes to shul, he exempts the entire community in that shul from saying tachnun. But if somebody, chas v'shalom, lo aleinu, lo aleichem, loses a relative that requires him to sit shiva, and if, let's say, on a day that he didn't have a minyan in his house, and his Rav told him to come to shul, so you should daven with the minyan and say the kadeshim, he does not say tachnun during a week of shiva, but he does not exempt the tzibur. Why the difference? So he said that Avelis is a private, individual mourning. We, of course, feel bad, and we're part of Klal Yisrael that another Yid had passed on. But in terms of continuity of Klal Yisrael, people die, and at this point, his relative passed away. So he himself doesn't say tachnun the whole shiva. But to come to shul and affect another person, it doesn't. But when a person is a chassan, he's not just building his own home, he's continuing that shalshelas, the link of Klal Yisrael, and it affects each and every Jew of Klal Yisrael. So if he comes to shul, not only as a chosen, he doesn't say tachton, but he exempts the entire tzibur, because his chasna is something which reflects Klal Yisrael. Now, said the Rosh Yeshiva, that's why these halachas of Yibum, which has to do with continuity of Klal Yisrael, and Gittin, which affects people having children, they're no more married, or Kiddushin, which promotes the entire family, are found in this week's Sedra. Now, there is a halacha in our Sedra that we do not put a shor and a chamor together to thresh or harvest fields, which means that there are some who would take an ox and take a donkey and harness them, and that they should go out into a field and do whatever they have to do. But the Torah admonished us and put a mitzvah, an isser, to put the two together, because, says the Abarbanel, that we cannot expect a shor, an ox which is very strong and mighty and powerful, has strength, with a simple donkey. And it's simply not fair to take an animal that can do its job and put it together with someone else who cannot keep up and cannot muster the strength and stamina to be able to do likewise what the shor is doing. So the Torah told us not to put anyone into a position, any animal in that kind of a position. And the lesson shouts to us that when parents, for instance, have their first two children are two boys, and the older boy is phenomenal, getting hundreds in every test and learning Gemara Baal Peh and Mishnayos Baal Peh, that you cannot put at the same test of time the second son to live up to the first son. Maybe he does not possess the quality of mind or the IQ or the ability, and he could end up the same Tyra Yid, wonderful Yid for Klal Yisrael, but he's moving at a different pace. So we cannot compare and demand of humans, whether it's our children, whether it's our students, whether it's in communal testing, equal to those who may have stronger ability, because it could cause the weaker child to go south, to give up, to become despondent, and we have to have a level of fairness to each and every person and each and every child. Now, in our Sedra, it also says that Lo Sesava Mitzri, that we're not supposed to hate an Egyptian. And we allow even intermarriage, that someone who's Megayer, or he was a Mitzri, and he wants to join Klal Yisrael, or he wants to marry into Klal Yisrael, that there is a time frame of when he cannot and when he can. But when we come to Moab and Edom, Moab and Ammon, we don't have any time criteria. We simply say never. Now, the Mitzri, I mean, they were throwing children. They had a cadre of soldiers, the Mitzrayim, by the Nile to make sure that every boy was being thrown in. And there were those by the brick building when they put the cement to put together the bricks to throw the children in. So they had a level of mean-spirited viciousness and cruelty that was terrible. But at the same time, they hosted Klal Yisrael, and the Mefarshim say that we still owe Hakoras HaTov for the fact that they gave us the lodgings and the place, and that the women, the children didn't have to be in this category of cruelty. It was the men who were beaten on if they didn't do their work or the quota of their work. And Rav Pam always used to talk about that difference, that the Mitzri, with all their bad, but there was a iota, a measurement of accommodation. We have to have Hakoras HaTov. Hakoras HaTov, whereas the Ammon and Moab, they didn't want to even sell us the bread and water. And that mean-spiritedness showed that they were rotten at the core, and therefore we are never allowed to marry in. And Boaz, who married Rus, only did so after the Chachamim, then after he himself, who was a shofet, paskind Ammon velo Ammonis, and that the Torah assered Moav, but velo Moavis, that the women were never assered. It was only the prohibition put out against the men not to ever have them marry into Klal Yisrael. Now, the Ramban discusses at length the famous question, why did Klal Yisrael have to go buy bread and water? Didn't they have the Mon and the Be'er of Miriam? They had the well that traveled with them miraculously, and which ended up in Tveria, in the water in the Kinneret. And that's why the Arizal, when he was on a rowboat, together with his Talmud, his star Talmud, Reb Chaim Vital, he told him at some point to take a cup and to draw forth water from the Kinneret and make a bracha and drink from it. And after that, Reb Chaim Vital writes that the secrets of the Torah, after that drink of water from the Kinneret, he never ever stumbled or was unable to delve into the deepest secrets of Kabbalah and to be able to perceive them. So he asked his Rebbe, what suddenly happened to me? And he said, because the place that I told you to take that drink of water in the Kinneret was right above Be'ero Shel Miriam, and it incorporates all the Mayanos HaChochma. So Miriam who the schus was the mayon, the be'er, and it traveled with them, and after she was nifter, it wasn't there. But the Ramban explains that they had all the miraculous availability of the be'er and of the mun. So what do they have to go ask Ammon or Moav to sell them, to let them this, that, to give them bread and water? So he answers the Ramban that the truth is the first 39 years in the Midbar, they didn't have to ask. But what happened was in the last year, and the Ramban writes it, that the Klal Yisrael in their last year suddenly expanded their thirst for some luxury items. That means when they drank the water from the Be'er, it quenched their thirst completely. But it didn't taste like wine, and it didn't taste like beer, and it didn't taste like some exotic drinks. And in that last year, says the Ramban, even the mun was limited to exactly what it was, even though you could think of it as the chocolate mousse or the duck or whatever you really desired. But once they got out of the format of enjoying the mun and enjoying the be'er, and that started with the bear, with the liquids, and they sought and they bought it from the outside, from Moab and from these surrounding nations that were there the last year in the Midbar. They acquired a thirst and a taste for it, and it led to not appreciating totally, and that in and of itself, the mun. And that's why they sought out that when they said bread and water, they meant the extended area and arena of delicious drinks that they didn't have in the Be'er. And that's why they were asking to buy and purchase from them. Now, we have in the beginning of the Sedra the Parsha of Sorer Umoreh, that the rebellious, wayward son. And the Gemara says that this whole application of this halacha is only when he was 13 to 13 and 3 months. And there were many qualifications to fit into that category. And the Gemara even has a dispute. One of the Amoraim said that it never happened and it never will happen. Example, the mother and father, when they jointly go into Beis Din, they have to be the exact same height. And their facial complexion has to be exactly the same, that they look exactly the same. Another thing, that their voices have to be, because it says, Einenu shomeya bikolenu, and that is a singular. In other words, they said, he doesn't listen to our voice, not voices, but bikolenu, to our voice. So the Gemara says our voice because the two voices have to be exactly the same. That if somebody would stand in a different room and listen to them speaking, the person could not tell, is it the father or the mother? And the lesson from that halacha is that parents who do not speak the same voice, the same language to their children, that the child wants something and goes to the father, and the father says, absolutely not. But the son knows that maybe he can go to the mother and get her to say yes, and that when the father asks him, why did you do this and that, his answer is built in. Mommy said so. So that's diversity that brings about trauma and destruction with children. That we cannot have a divided, separate approach to what to do and what not to do with our children, with our students, and in our community. And it leads to terrible hypocrisy, and it leads to a format of confusion, disappointment, and divergence, which bring out the worst in the children. So there has to be a unified voice, and parents have to live in unity, and they have to conduct themselves with constancy and consistency. And they cannot be on two different tracks with their families. And that's what we learn from the Enenu Shomea B'Kolenu, that we are not of the equal status with each and every approach of how we should live and what we should not do. Now, it says, the Chazal say that the Ben Sorah or Morah, he is Nidun al Shem Ha'osid. That means since in these 3 months we see that he is ravaging, he is ravenous in his food eating and his wine drinking, that we say that he's going to end up murdering people. He'll do for his taiva what he has to do. You see it by drug people. They go, they rob, they ruin their lives, and they get into things that they can't control themselves, because one thing leads to another, and they become so addicted to it that they can't break loose from the addiction. And the question is asked, why should the Ben Sorah or Morah be killed now? That his parents bring him into Bezdin because we're worried about what's going to be. We have a rule by Avram Avinu with Yishmael that when the Malachim, the angels, stood up and said, you're going to save Yishmael, he's thirsty, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu produced a well, a miracle, a well that he should have water and not die. So the Malachim asked him, but he's going to be the future Yishmael. The Arabs, how many of your children are going to be killed and tortured because of him? So why save him? So HaKadosh Baruch Hu answered, Ba'asher hu sham. We take an accounting in Olam Hazeh of how a person is today. And if today he's doing tshuva, even though HaKadosh Baruch Hu could see very clearly that he's going to get worse and he'll come back to the same aveirus, and he'll come back to doing worse things than he's doing now, but we don't consider that. That is the rule of Ba'asher hu sham, when he is there at that point. So the obvious question is, why over here are we killing the Ben Sorah or Morah? On his field, Rashi says, Al Shem Ha'osid, that for what he's going to end up doing, Yomos Zakai v'al Yomos Mezid, or Chayev. So They answer and say, some of the Meforshim, they quote a Gemara, that there were two people that were supposed to be killed by the government for some Aveira, something that they did. And they, before they were killed, they both got very sick. And the Gemara asks, why was it that they were equally sick? And there's two separate sets of people. I don't want to be misunderstood or misstaked. And in one case, that they were both chayiv, that they were obligated, they were going to be killed, they were convicted. One ended up being freed, and one ended up being killed. And the two people in the hospital that were deathly ill and destined to die shortly, one suddenly got better, and the other one died from the sickness. And the Gemara asks, why is it that one was able to stand up and be cured and go on with life, and one of those two convicted criminals were also given the gift of going on with life? So the Gemara answers and says that in each case, all four men davened, but one davened with all of his heart and tears, and one davened sincerely, but it wasn't 100%. And the koyach hatfila can make the whole difference. And they bring a raya, these Meforshim, because the pasuk by Yishmael says, in other words, he really should have died. And the Ben Sura Mora is the halacha, and that is the halacha. We do look at what they're going to become, not what they are then, but with the koyach hatfila. And it says in the pasuk there by Yishmael, Vayishma Hashem es kol hana'ar. In other words, the baby was crying with such a sincere, effective asking HaKadosh Baruch Hu to save his life that he ended up living. And that's what outweighed. Not that really we only judge what it is today, but what's going to actually end up being. And that's why on Tisha B'Av, we tell the person who's doing a shidduch to say Mazel Tov on Tisha B'Av. So the Yerushalmi says that you could really take away a basherter. So the Yerushalmi says, and that's the reason, Shema Yikad Menu Acha, the Shulchan Aruch says that you have to say Mazel Tov on Tisha B'Av. Tisha B'Av is a day of mourning. Is that the time to celebrate even with just a Mazel Tov? Is that the day that's opportune for that? So the Shulchan Aruch says you should say the Mazel Tov and complete the process of the shidduch, because maybe somebody else will snatch away the shidduch. Shemi yikadmenu acher. So the Yerushalmi asks that the Gemara says, Arboyim yom koydem yetziras havlad machrizin bas ploini leploini, that we call out who's going to be the match of each and every person 40 days before conception. So how could you say that someone's going to come and snatch away the shidduch? There's destiny. Arboim yom koydem yetziras havlad. So the Yerushalmi answers and says that the koyach berachamim, that's the word that they use, and the Korbaneda and everyone talks about it, that it means the koyach hatfila. So someone could be destined for such and such a person to be married to them, and somebody else indeed could go and daven his head off and cry and end up with that person's basherter. And that's the koyach hatfila. And I once mentioned to you when we talk about the Ori Miklat that the mother of the Kohen Gadol ran around giving clothes and candy to bribe the people who were unintentionally guilty, but they were unintentional, so they were allowed to run away to one of the cities of refuge, the 6 cities, 3 here and 3 there, and the 42 cities of the Levium. And the Goyal Hadam, the family of the person who was unintentionally killed, has no right to go into the city and touch that person. If the person walks out of the city, then they have the right, without the bezin, without it, to go and just kill the man. But to go and to kill him out in the city, they have no right. So it says that the mother used to go from city to city, because the only way they could be freed was when the Kohen Gadol died. Now the Kohen Gadol, if he died, everyone went home. So the mother was worried that the people would curse her son to die. So she went there to give them clothes and candy and chocolate and also that to sweeten the air, like a bribe. Don't curse my son to die. I don't want to lose my son. So the Yerushalmi asks, I mean, Shlomo HaMelech said, Kil las chochem al tovo. The fact that somebody curses someone doesn't mean it's going to happen. So the Yerushalmi says, exactly. It doesn't happen because of the curse, but it happens because of the tefillah. That when they start to daven that he should die, so they should be able to go back home, that is the power of tefillah, that they can cause him absolutely to die. And that is the reason that the mother of the Kohen Gadol ran around to the different cities to make sure that she sweetened the atmosphere, hopefully that they wouldn't daven for her son to die. So over here, that was the item that outweighed everything else, the fact that Yishmael cried and offered a true tefillah. And the 2 people that were supposed to be killed and the 2 people that got so deathly sick, each one of the pairs ended up living because of his tefillah, which is apropos for Rosh Hashanah. Rosh Hashanah is the most opportune time, and then the 10 days, Aseres Yemei Tshuva, and then Yom Kippur, because it's through tefillah. Yes, we say tefillah and tshuva and tzedakah, because those are 3 components that you can't come in and ask someone for something holding the knife still that you just killed somebody with. You have to stop for the moment and move on into a realm of shaking yourself up. You know, the saddest thing I heard 2 weeks ago, I knew the man. And he lived in Pittsburgh. He was 83 and he died. He never married, but he was a very, very nice man. Always the courtesies, thank you, please, can I do anything for you? He was a very, very courteous man. So why do I say that Nebuch, it was the biggest Rachmanis? Because this man, his whole life, tried to shake the compulsion and the addiction of day trading. Now, I don't know exactly what day trading is. I have to be honest with you. I never bought a stock in my life. I don't know what day trading is or night trading. I have no idea what this is. But it is some sort of gamble, I guess, with the stock market. The person could make money, could lose. And this was a man he was a smart person, and he was a kind person, but he kept losing his whole life. People were begging him to stop the day trading. And he couldn't pull himself out. He lost every penny he ever had. And he was a smart guy. And he thought that he could beat the system, that he's going to become the millionaire. And he used to tell people, when they said, why aren't you getting married? I mean, you're a nice man, you're from your personality. And he would say, because I want to have a stable income and I want to be on my feet to be able to do the proper things, to be able to establish a home. You need money, you need to pay for this, you need to pay that. And that's how he justified it, fooling only Nebuch himself, no one else. And the Rahmanas, it was a big Rahmanas, because this is a man that, if he wouldn't have been so addicted, he wouldn't keep losing his money. And he was in debt, and he just borrowed from here and just borrowed from there, but any money that came into his hand, this compulsiveness, caused him to wither away. And he used to daven about it. He knew he was justifying it, and no, it's not this, it's not that. That's always what he said. But in the moment of truth, he knew he was withering away his life with this day trading. And 83 years old, he passed away 2 weeks ago. So, and I was very sad, because the loss of such potential and such ability to go down the drain. So when we daven, we have to first of all daven for the right things. We have to set our compass. It's like if you're given one wish, you know, there's a discussion in the Rishonim. There was a kid, this is a true story, around 700 years ago, one of the czars or one of the kings decided to give a Jew who was incarcerated, he was in jail, and he said, you know, I've decided to give you a day of your choice to go out of jail. And you can spend 24 hours out of jail. And there's a whole discussion. So he asked the Shaila, which date should I take? So some said, wait for Yom Kippur. That's the biggest date to be out. Then he was asked he was told by others, and these were the Rishonim that were discussing this Shaila, and most came up with the answer because it was right before Rosh Hashanah. So the question was, should he go out for Tzom Gedalia or Yom Kippur? Now, most of us would say, of course, go out Yom Kippur. Tzom Gedalia is a fast day, but where does it compare to Yom Kippur? But most of them paskined, you go out Tzom Gedalia, because the first mitzvah that comes to your hand, meaning fast days or which day to pick, they wanted it to be a special, you seize and you go after that. You don't wait. Do you know if you're going to live the extra week from Tzom Gedalia to Yom Kippur? You don't know what's going to happen. So mitzvah shebo liyodcha al tachmitzena. And that is really for us with opportunities. Many of the tremendous tzaddikim, they, in moments of thirst to do a mitzvah, when they were asked, why are you can do it tomorrow, it's not going to be so freezing cold outside to say Kiddush Levana, their answer always was, I have the Levana now, I don't know if there's going to be a Levana tomorrow. So our structure of our habits bring us not only to be consistent, but we have to jump at opportunities and seize the opportunity to be able to be Makayim, the mitzvahs that come before us. Like the Yetzer Hara that tells the person, well, you don't have to give out money. Maybe you're going to buy something later and you're going to need the money. The person is putting out his hand and he's a Yid, give him. And the Rambam paskins, you even give a goy, but I'm not saying that is the same threshold and the same opportunity of a yid asking for tzedakah, and that we should be able to push ourselves into the direction of doing what should be done and not sleeping over on it. And that's the klal of mitzvah shebo liyodcha al tachmitzena. Now, we know that there is a mitzvah in this week's Sedra of Shiluach HaKan, which means that if you come upon a nest and you see that there's a mother bird and there are children, eggs there, you cannot take the children in front of the mother, that you have to shoo away the mother, or you have to get the mother gone, and then ves habanim tikach loch, then you can take the children. And there's a very big, the Ramban and the Rambam both say it's to heighten the level of compassion. And that's the reason that there's only two things in the Torah that there's arichas yomim promised to a person. One of them is Shiluach HaKan, and that's why there's some advertisements you see of people that's their parnasa. They want to be makayim the mitzvah in their lifetime of Shiluach HaKan, and to go find a nest or find the birds, and it's very, very hard. But there are some people who do this as a parnasa, that you pay them $500, they give you a nest, and he does it 50 times or 100 times a year. He has his $50,000. He brings the person to the nest, he shows them how to do it, and he gets the mitzvah of Shiluach HaKan. And it says that the Medrash says, the other place is kibbut av v'eim, that when a person, the Torah says that when you have proper kibbut av v'eim, then you are zoicha to long life. Now the Gemara in Kiddushin says by kibbut av v'eim, long life means in olam haba. But many seize upon the fact that these are the only two things that it says arichas yomim, and the Medrash says that the hardest mitzvah to do in olam hazeh is kibbut av v'eim. It's the chomer shebechamuros. And the easiest mitzvah to do is Shiluach HaKan. And the Rambam and the Ramban both say that it's to bring out the midah of Rachmanis, because we don't want to just go you want to take the birds, you want to take the nest, but you have to do something which shows compassion for a mother who's right there with her children. And that's why you are expected, you're getting a lottery ticket win, you're getting a arichas yomim for this. And others say, like the Vilna Gaon, and he bases it on a Zohar, the Shloh HaKadosh, The Shloh HaKadosh says that when we talk about the Vilna Gaon, that when we talk about Shiluach HaKan, it's the easiest mitzvah, but Hashem wants us to be an achzor. Achzor means to be a mean-spirited, who in the world wants to be that, and why would it be rewarded if that's the case, that it's an ugly thing to do with Arichas Yomim? So he explains, the Vilna Gaon says, because there is a temptation to have Rachmanis. And we have to train ourselves to condition our minds that when we do a mitzvah, it's not just because of compassion or because of stubbornness or mean-spiritedness. We do it because HaKadosh Baruch Hu said to do it. And that's the reason the Vilna Gaon, who holds opposite from the Ramban and the Rambam, who say it's pure Rachmanis and it sharpens our Rachmanis to be like HaKadosh Baruch Hu of Mahu Rachum, Mahu Chanun, that helps us get to that level. He says that it helps us to get to the level of listening and loving to do what HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants us to do, even if it seems to be a Maisa Achzorius. By sending away a mother, what's this? To take away children and send away a mother? That's how you would think. And that's the reason that the Orach Chaim HaKadosh talks about the mitzvah that when there's an Ir HaNidachas, that an entire city went and served Avodah Zarah. So the mitzvah is to go into the city and to slaughter, literally kill, every man, woman, and child. So the pasuk says, when you do this, V'richamcha HaKadosh Baruch Hu will have Rachmanis on you. Says the Orach Chaim HaKadosh, what does that mean? Killing out the women, the children. So, because when a person goes and does that, if he went into a city that they all began, the whole city to serve Avodah Zarah, and you kill out the city, you become a murderer. Murder isn't anymore in your eyes this terrible thing that in your lifetime you would never do. But if the pasuk says, go kill out the city, how can you remain a Rachman? Says the Torah, V'richamcha, HaKadosh Baruch Hu will have Rachmanis, that you will remain a merciful person. And I quote Chazal usually. I never quote someone like Golda Meir. I don't want to say lahavdil, she was a Jewish woman, and I'm sure she did many acts of chesed in her life, but she once publicly said, I will forgive the Arabs for killing many of our boys because they were put into war by their leaders and by their countries. So I could understand where they were coming from. So the fact that they were murderers of our children, one day I could see myself forgiving them. But I can't forgive them for making our Jewish boys into murderers. And that I will never forgive them for, because they changed the essence, the fabric. A person who goes out for the best reason and kills 50 people, do you come home overawed and flabbergasted at seeing someone being killed? You just got done killing 50 people. So, and that's why a mitzvah of going out to war, that part of it was that they came back because it was a milchemes mitzvah. HaKadosh Baruch Hu told them to wage the war, that it didn't strip away and dilute their level of love and compassion for another human life, even when they came back from war. Now, we know that the opening parsha begins with if Klal Yisrael goes out to war and they see somebody, and these were tzaddikim, because we know from last week's Seder that somebody was not a Yerush Shamayim. The Gemara says if somebody even talked between putting his tefillin shel yad and his tefillin shel rosh, that was considered the sin that would cause him to go back home and not go and participate in the war, that he was considered a Bal Aveira. So we're talking about tzaddikim. I mean, these people were really a high level. But when somebody went out to war and saw a very pretty woman, which our Seder begins, and unfortunately crosses that line, and the Torah tells you to take her home and to go through a process, and then you have the right to marry her. And Rashi says that lo dibra Torah ella keneged hayetzer hara, because the Torah felt that if he sees this woman, he'll be so tempted, he'll do it be'isser. He'll be intimate in a framework under an umbrella of doing a pure act of Aveira with a Goyish woman. So Rashi says that the Torah is telling you this, that with the Yetzer Hara is ready and willing and more than thrilled to have you trip. So the Shaloah HaKadosh says that the reason that the Torah allowed him to bring the woman home was because we have a rule, Mayim Genuvim. I'm sorry?
Yimtako.
Yes, Mayim Genuvim Yimtako, that when you participate or do something that was absolutely forbidden, there is a satisfaction in doing it that makes it sweeter than anything else. So the Shaloah HaKadosh says the reason you're allowed to bring her home is because then the Torah is telling you you're allowed to bring her home, so it's not Mayim Genuvim anymore, and the Aveira will kick in and he won't do it. Because only when it's Mayim Genuvim is he so thirsty to do it and to get away with what he would normally never consider doing. Now the Torah is telling him, and it becomes mutter to bring her home. So once it's mutter, then it's something that will take away that crust of thirstiness beyond thirstiness to enjoy and to do. So says the Shaloah HaKadosh. And with that he explains why the Gemara says that Rav Nachman's wife, her name was Yalta, and she asked her husband that, show me in the Torah everything that is also that there is something mutter. So he started to tell her, the Torah asher this, and you can this and that. You can participate, and you can, let's say basar b'cholov. So he said the keva, and inside of the cow where the milk comes from the most, that's meat, and and it was mutter for us to drink the milk and to shech the animal properly and then use what is in it. So he cited an example for her to take away that burning thirst of wanting to eat something or do something that was completely forbidden by showing a case of where it is mutter, and that would take away the thirst and that burning desire to do something which was absolutely forbidden. Now the Shem Shmuel says, the Sachachover, the Avnei Nezer's son, says that There are three parshas in the opening of our Sedra. There's Yefas Toar, the woman that we just discussed. Then there's a parsha of Bechor. And the parsha basically says that when you take two women and you end up loving one and hating the other, but if the Bechor is the son of the hated one, then you have to give the Pishanayim, the double portion to the Bechor, even though you would like to give it to the other one because you love the other wife more, and this one you don't love. But if she is the one that produced the Bechor, you have to give double. And then the third parsha is the Ben Sora or Mora. So he asked, what is this parsha of Bechor doing right here? In other words, we understand that the Torah talks about war and finding a woman that you desire, and then putting the Ben Sora or Mora because it's a warning that if you'll end up marrying her and have a child, that's the one that's going to end up a Ben Sora or Mora. But between those two parshas of Yefas Toar and Ben Sora or Mora, we have sandwiched in this inyan of Bechor. And he answers and says, because of course the reason it's there on the surface is because if you take the Eishes Yefas Toar and you desire her and you bring her home, you'll end up, possibly you're going to have another wife, and you'll end up loving the other wife, and this one you're going to end up hating, and then you'll have the Ben Sora Mora coming out from. So the Torah wanted to put you into a position that you would be least happy with what you have to do, and you have to look in the mirror and realize, listen, you started off with a taiva that 99.9% of your chaverim in that war did not do. And you're going to want to make a choice in favor of your beloved one, not the hated one. So the Torah tells you that regardless of your rationale and what you have chosen, you have to do the right thing. And if the Bechor indeed is from the Ben Hasnua, he is from the hated one, you have to fully live up to what is demanded of you. And we have many situations each and every day, and in a moment of truth, we know we cannot do what we would like to do and that we sometimes dislike doing. But the tzivui of the Torah comes first and foremost. We hope that we will continue to strive and thrive in the month of Elul, and that we should be able to bring out the best of each and every potential that we possess. And people are given gifts that are so magnificent, we shouldn't sleep through life never mining the raw materials that we possess and bring them to fruition. Have a good week.